Hello. I have been working as a professional fundraiser now for a long time, 20 years, if you can believe that. The first 3 or 4 years that I spent as a professional funder, I was mostly doing prospect research. I worked on a team of professional fundraisers that included grant writers, development directors, development assistants, major gifts officers. All kinds of different professions exist in the world of fundraising. And I was fortunate to be on some fairly talented fundraising teams. When I was at the Seed Foundation, while I was there for 2 years, and we raised $60 million over 2 years. We built a school. We started building a second school, and we funded the operations of those schools fully. Then there was a crash, an economic crash in 2008, you may have heard of, which changed how, lots of stuff and made prospect research an even more important skill. I eventually went on, but my hope today is to help pass along some of the stuff I learned in those trainings I attended, and some of the stuff I've learned about how to research funders. We'll talk about some of the tools that are available, how to assess your own organization and determine and how to look over a funder and see if they are a fit for you. Like I said, I spent 3 years being trained on how to do this. And during those 3 years, I was learning pretty much every day. Some of you, I noticed in the chat, right? Some of you folks are from all over the world. You might be working on a topic that you don't necessarily have 3 years to wait. I totally understand that. We want to get the funding into your programs. And the good news is that there are a lot of funders out there looking to fund programs. But some of the work will need to be done by you to find, identify, contact, and hopefully apply to them, which is what we're going to go over today. Without further ado, I will now go into screen share real quick. Okay, so I believe now you can see my screen. Is that, can I get a?
Yes.
Great. So this is when I was putting together some research and notes to do this session. The first things I did is I Googled the title of the panel. I just Googled finding funder fit. I wanted to see if other people were using the term or not. And it gave me back some good results and some stuff I've used. But I took this screenshot of what came up. And you'll notice right away, they start off with some good advice, something that I agree with. There are no shortcuts to finding the right funding source. This is something that, like I said, we talk about funder fit in the report discussions a lot at the end of our round. And a lot of times folks come in and they just sort of want me to rattle off the ideal funders for them, or like make it very, very easy for them to find like the obvious quick funders. And I really have to agree. It's not, Google is showing us information from the Grantsmanship Center, but it's what they've chosen to show, as the very first thing to us when we Google this term, that there are no shortcuts to finding the right funding source. And I agree with them there. However, Google right away sort of contradicts themselves. The very first video they show down here, you'll see how to find good fit funders in under 60 minutes, right? I mean, I realize this, and I'm sure that that's Instrumental, which is an organization that helps groups do prospect research. And my guess is that this is a very good video. Feel free to look this video up yourself. Watch the 55 minutes. There's probably a lot of good stuff in there. But I just wanted to show you this screenshot to highlight some of the challenges here. Right, you've got Google right here telling you that there aren't any shortcuts, and then immediately presenting you with a potential shortcut. I think probably the first thing they said there is correct. There are no shortcuts. Finding funders that fit is going to be an ongoing process. You're going to want to make doing prospect research a regular part of your organization. We've got 3 folks in the waiting room. I'm just going to go ahead and admit them all. So yeah, you're going to want to make this a regular part of what you're doing. And I understand that if you're the only person at your organization or the only fundraiser, it might be very difficult for you to find the time to put this into the research. That's, you know, this is going to be a challenge. If anyone told you that finding grants was easy, that person was misleading. Like I said, at the various different nonprofits I've worked at that brought in a lot of grants, that had a lot of success on the grant front, had large professional teams that included staff who spent their entire time doing prospect research. I briefly worked at Conservation International, which is one of the world's largest conservation nonprofits. And a lot of my responsibility there was researching prospects as well, which I did with 10 other people. We had 10 full-time staff there who did nothing other than donor research and prospect research and research on our current donors, and try to make sure that the fundraisers who were asking for money had all the information that they needed in order to make the most compelling possible asks. And I understand hardly anybody on this call today is going to be able to afford 10 full-time prospect researchers, but I do want to make clear to you, right, if you're going after conservation grants, so is Conservation International, and that's sort of what you're up against. The good news is that a lot of funders do want to fund smaller local groups. They don't want to fund huge, enormous nonprofits anymore. They believe that they can have more impact funding local. But you will need to find those funders and learn what their priorities are and the processes for applying. So we're going to go into talking a little bit about how to do that. Let me just check my, yeah, so I am not going to claim to know any shortcuts on how to find funders. I don't think I can make this easier for you very quickly. But I think I can explain a little bit about how difficult it is and show you some of the tools that you can use to do this work. But my initial point here, I really want to get across, and hopefully it's getting across, is that, like Google says, this is real work. Finding funders is going to take some time. And I applaud you all for the work that you've done already and for the time you're taking to attend this webinar. Hopefully you send us proposals so I can give you some more specific tips with the help of my evaluators. We're going to start right now with a little self-assessment for everybody. So think about the organization that you are fundraising for. I fundraise as well. I'm the founder of a nonprofit Unfunded list, so I fundraise as well. And these are steps I follow myself. But there's two questions that you're going to want to ask about your organization right off the. So that went about as smooth as I expected it to go. All right, so the two questions are what and where. Que and donde, qua and où, right? You are going to have, when you fill out your grant proposals, you're going to have plenty of time to answer more nuanced questions, provide a lot of detail, talk about how, right, and why, and you're going to have time to answer other questions. But to start off, we want to be very basic and practical about our organizations, because this is a really good way. Like, funders can be described with these two answers, and organizations can be described with these two answers. Obviously, there's a lot of additional detail, but this is where we want to start. And I will say that I should give credit to a man named Conan Louis, who was my boss at the Seed Foundation, and he's the one who taught me this approach. So what exactly do I mean by what and where? I mean, right, you need to think about your organization, and you want to know the issue, the social issue that you are addressing, and you need to know where that is. Funders choose an issue that they want to have an impact on, and they also choose a geographic location on where they want to have that impact. I think funders are difficult to describe sometimes, but most funders can be described with the answers to these two questions. So, for instance, this funder funds health in Zambia, right? Or this funder funds rural sports programs in Northern Alabama, which is a state here in the United States, right? Other funders might be much more broad and global. we fund innovation to lift people out of poverty globally. We fund in every single country, right? Or we fund in East Africa, or here's a very specific list of countries where we fund, right? You're going to want to make sure that the what and where of your organization, first of all, that you can answer it, right? And then you're going to want to look for funders that have the same what and where, right? So if you are running a program for social entrepreneurs in Sudan, you will need to find funders that fund programs for social entrepreneurs and that fund in Sudan, right? If that funder funds social entrepreneurs but is very clear that they do not fund in Sudan, then you should move on, because it will be a waste of your time to go there. In general, something that Conan told me when he was teaching me this stuff was never fall in love with a funder, right? You want to make your in general. You can fall in love with them after they give you the check, I suppose, but beforehand, right? You're just trying to make a list of as many possible prospects as possible. This was also on the Google list, right? Think why it is possible. You are going to want to send some stuff out to as many different funders that you determine fit as possible. But you'll save yourself a lot of heartache and a lot of time by making sure that you're clear on these questions before you start doing your research. Right. So if you're focused on climate change in Tanzania, right, you need to go out and find funders that are looking to move the needle on climate change and are willing to fund in Tanzania. A lot of funders, if nothing, have rules about how they can fund. Their board has written down bylaws. There are specific processes. Some funders are related to the government. So there may have been a law that is passed, right? So the law says that this taxpayer money is going into grants that must fund on these issues, right? So funders really don't, they might change priorities at some point, but at any given static moment, they have a what and a where that they're not generally going to stray from. So one of the things that might be helpful for me in terms of knowing the audience a little bit today is if you could use think a little bit about your organizations. I'd love to know some of the folks we're talking to and try to answer what and where in the chat. So, if you're doing social entrepreneurship in Argentina, let me know. Just sort of, right, we're looking for 2 one-word answers if possible. The country that you're working in and the social issue that you're covering, right? Please feel free to chat those in, and I may use some of them as examples as we go along. And in general, I would say, right when you've answered these 2 questions, a good place to start. I gotta go to the chat now. Excuse me. So here's a good youth and women development in South Africa. This was one of you. Thank you, everybody, for sending stuff in. Environmental conflicts in Chile, climate change in Nigeria, plastic pollution in Mexico, asylum rights in Greece. Here's one in Spanish. Economic equality in Argentina, I think. Food security in Venezuela. Great. You seem to know the answers to these questions. These are great topics. Unintentional teenage pregnancy in Argentina. Climate change and agriculture in Tanzania. Excellent. Lots of great topics. And everything that I've seen come by so far is something for which funders exist. There are funders that do fund the what and wheres that you are listing out. There's also funders that would not fund these topics. So for pretty much all of you, there are funders in the world who definitely have the capacity, right? They have the money to fund your programs, but they won't because you're not in the right place and you're not working on the right issue. That's something else that Conan taught me. When you're assessing a funder, which we're going to look at some actual funders in a moment here. There's 3 things to think about with that. First, obviously, is capacity, right? How much money do they have? what the size of their grants, right? Are they capable of doing this? If a funder with no money is not really worth your time, right? So in addition to capacity is somewhat obvious there. You also want to look at interest. Are they interested in the work we're doing? Do they have the potential to be interested in what we're doing? Are we making the kind of change that they are looking to fund? And then the third thing that you want to look at, this one can be very tricky, is it's just accessibility. Can I access this fund? Do I know them? Do I know somebody that knows them? Do they have an open proposal process? Do they have a closed proposal process? Right? What is their accessibility levels? I used to have, when I worked for Conan, they gave me a very specific, I don't remember the scoring system, but everybody I looked at, I would score them in those 3 categories. So if somebody had over $1 billion, they got a 10 out of 10 for capacity. If they had a history of funding schools like ours, they got a 10 out of 10 for interest. And if somebody from our board, or we had a very clear way of applying to them, right, they would get a 10 out of 10 for capacity. And then we would then when it came time to deciding who is the grant writer going to apply to, we would apply to the prospects that had gotten the highest scores from me. Generally, right, we can start with Google for most of these topics. I just want to say that Google is definitely not where you want to end doing your research. I've been using Google my entire career as a prospect researcher. It is one of the few tools that existed in 2004 when I started working that is still around as a prospect tool. There were some other research tools I used back then that actually don't exist anymore. And there's new ones that come out all the time. Google's been around for a long time. They're changing their algorithm constantly. The search results that I see are going to be based on my activity, and the search results that you see are going to be based on your activity. So not everybody sees the same results, but in general, one of the best ways to start doing prospect research, I'm going to screen share again, is to Google the answers to your 2 questions. Is everybody seeing Google right now?
Yes.
Great. So we will start with, I'm having trouble with my keyboard. My space bar and my U are sticking. For youth development. And so just quick tip on Google, the "and" will force it to search for both of the terms. Putting South Africa in quotes will, then that way it won't search for just Africa, it will search for South Africa. And let's see, there it goes. So actually, so an organization that I'm going to talk about is late in a little bit is Instrumental. This is it's a paid subscription service that you can use to research funders of various topics, right? It is not a funder. So even though I Googled funders for youth development, the first thing Google showed me is a research tool, not a funder. That's something to be clear. Like Google doesn't necessarily give you the very clear answer you're looking for. Their second answer, though, is definitely a fit. I am somewhat familiar with the African Youth Development Fund, right? And then you could, at this point, click on that, and then you're looking at a funder's website. And you're at a funder's website that has the same, hopefully it has the same what and where's. The first thing we've noticed here is like this just says Africa. If I was doing my research as someone who works at a CSO that does youth development work in South Africa, right? I already know that they're clearly interested in youth development. One of the first things I'm going to want to look for is do they actually fund in South Africa, which will hopefully be somewhere on their website. Whoever gave that answer out there, feel free to take this. This is a potential lead. You should definitely have this on your prospect list and give it a look. So I'm going to do just another one really quick. Try to do something a little bit more challenging. So here at Unfunded List, we review grant proposals for organizations all over the world, right? That's a little bit hard. So what I would say is it's like what I do is philanthropy support, and where we do it is global. This is something that's very difficult. This is not as easy to find funders as like health or youth development or something. So, but we can do funders for philanthropy support. And we'll put that in quotes. And global. I've actually never done that. Yeah, see? They didn't really like that. All right. Yeah, so we will now look at So I'm going to talk about Instrumental in a minute. Instrumental is a for-profit company and has a large marketing budget. So anybody who goes out into the world and starts doing prospect research, you're probably going to hear from them, right? There's a reason they showed up at the top of the Google results because they have a marketing department that spends time on their Google ads and everything and make sure that that's true. Candid is a very large nonprofit. And it's probably the largest nonprofit that's it's probably the largest nonprofit that focuses on prospect research and nonprofit data, tools, and resources, as you can see here on the screen. We have a question. It is in French. I believe someone's having a technical problem.
Someone asked if how to activate the interpretation, but I responded privately, okay, and also generally, publicly.
And just to be, someone asked, so the way that I used to do to mark funders, sorry for not writing it on the thing, is their capacity, their amount of money, their interest. Yeah, do they care about the change that you make? And then accessibility. Yeah, is it possible to apply, right? And does my organization have any kind of connection to them? Like Stina, that's a very good question. And I probably should have written them up on one of the screens. We can try to share that afterwards. I think we're sending out a PDF afterwards.
Yes, we are going to send support material after the meeting. And also I'm saving all the questions in one file, so you can read them all at the end if you want, and everybody.
I think that would be best. I will try to, please try to your best to save your questions to the end. Hopefully I will answer your question as I go along here. So here is, this is the website for Candid, candid.org. And again, it's a big nonprofit. One of the reasons they're so big is they used to be two different large nonprofits. One of them was called GuideStar, and the other nonprofit was called Foundation Directory, or maybe it was called Foundation Directory Online, I think, or the Foundation Center. That's what it was called. So those two nonprofits merged. They're both nonprofits. Basically what they did is they accessed the publicly available data about nonprofits and put together tools, research tools, reports, all kinds of great information, both organizations. And they used to work very closely with each other. Several years ago, they merged into one very large nonprofit. And so this is a resource that can be used by organizations from anywhere in the world, but the data that they are pulling from is US-based data. I just want to be clear on that. Funders here in the US, if they're a foundation, they have to file paperwork with the IRS, with our Internal Revenue Service every year. That includes a lot of information, and that information is then made available to the public. The information includes who their board members are, who is the highest paid staff member, any consultant that gets paid over $10,000 is listed on the report. And most importantly, near the end is a list of all their grants, the amount and the organization who received the grant. Now that form's called a 990. And in fact, you can go to the actual IRS's website, irs.gov, and you can pull, the tax returns from foundations that fund and also from nonprofits that receive grants as well. And if you know if you're very good at reading accounting forms and IRS forms, right, that's really all you would need is the IRS's website, because this is publicly available information. These nonprofits take the publicly available information. They have large teams of software engineers and coders and reporters and other folks, and they put it together in more easily accessible forms. They have paid services, but they also have free stuff that you can access. I will say most of the world's nonprofits that raise a lot of money in grants probably do use the paid service, but that the free services that they and others offer are usually going to be pretty good for folks that are just starting. So I'll just show you quickly GuideStar. I use GuideStar pretty much every day. And in fact, I've been using GuideStar for like, I don't know, at least 20 years. So actually, this is my account. After the merger, they make you sign in every time. Actually signed in just like an hour ago. I thought it would stay. All right, so now, yeah, here we are. You can look up any nonprofit. So we'll go with a really big one. You may have heard of the Red Cross. Right here we have, and then right away they show you, right, just off the top here, quite a bit of information. One, that they raised, this would be on their most recent tax return, so it's probably their 2022 return. They raised $3,600,000,000. It's a lot of money. And they have 3.8 billion. That means that's how much they had in the bank at the end of the year, right? As of their thing. You can click on it. You can see that they have a platinum account with Candid, which means not only is there publicly available info there, but the platinum account means that someone at Red Cross logged in here and provided additional extra information for transparency's sake. Unfunded List is also a platinum level organization on Candid. I highly recommend taking the time to sign up for a Candid account and getting to platinum on GuideStar. It's free. All you have to do is answer questions. It's a lot of questions, but if you have the platinum account, then you show up at the top of the list. And there's actually a lot of stuff that comes for free with it. So for instance, if you get to the platinum level, then you can use their paid version of Foundation Search, which is a very valuable tool for prospect researchers. I'll say I did this for the first time last year, and the very first time filling out the forms took me a while. It took me the better part of a day to fill everything out. But then when I renewed this year, I only had to answer like they had a couple new questions, and that was it. So it was very easy to renew it once I had it set up. And there's a lot of resources that they make available to you for free if you're willing to give them the information. Their mission here is to make the nonprofit sector transparent so people can look this stuff up. So it's a pretty good opportunity. Right, and you can see lots of information here, their address. This lady is their president. She's quite famous. You can Google her. This is an old organization. It's been around since 1938. And you can see here's how here's a couple of their different answers to the what, right? Subject area would be the what, right? And then see, so that tax form I was talking about, that's 990. So I can actually pull, and then, so they are a very transparent organization. They have both the publicly available and then the one provided by the organization. The one provided by the organization probably has less information than the publicly available. So this is a tax form. I don't expect you all to be able to read it. Most of what's on here is not particularly useful. There's a lot of stuff that you can learn about the Red Cross from this form, though. And I'm not going to dive all the way into it. Just not for nothing. I'm sure this is a several hundred-page document. But right off the first page, right? Prior year contributions and grants, current year contributions and grants, their program revenue, investment revenue, all that stuff. Their mission, these are their different programs and how much money each of those programs raises. If you go, it's usually on page 11. Yeah, here we go. So Gail McGovern, their president. She is one of the highest paid nonprofit employees in the world. making, this was a couple years ago, she made $819,000. She has been widely criticized for making that much, by the way. And then, right, like I said, the access, right? These are all the people on the board. If you know these people and you want to talk to the Red Cross, this is a pretty good, right? Pretty good resource to see this in their names. And then also anyone, like any board member who's ever been compensated, you can see there's a decent number of folks at the Red Cross making significant salaries. I'm about jealous. I also, like I mentioned, consultants who, if a consultant is paid over $10,000, no, oh, sorry, they've raised that number to 100,000. Yeah, so if an independent contractor receives over $100,000 payment from a nonprofit, they have to list that. The Red Cross paid a staggering 369 different organizations over $100,000. And they've listed the like top 5 ones here. This can be pretty useful for like, if you run a courier service, for instance, you should know that they pay a lot of money to courier services, right? And if you were a printing and mailing company, then you know exactly how much they paid to this company last year. Red Cross is one of the world's largest nonprofits, like I said. So you're gonna be able to find just sort of a wealth of information in here. There's also this page that shows how much they spend in different categories. So like, here's how much they spend on advertising, right? Other things. And I don't know if they give grants. Let's see. Let's check really quickly and move on to something else. Yeah, this is more on their employees. Investments that they've made. This is very interesting. I am perhaps more interested in looking at 990s than the average person. But I can and have spent several days just like poring over various 990s for different nonprofits. Every time Red Cross or some other nonprofit gets into the news, right? If I see a big news story about a big nonprofit, it's the first thing I'll do, go look up their information. It is so I should note that you can also look up funders, right? So you can look up the Gates Foundation. I think the Gates Foundation is the longest 990. It's very interesting. So this Gates Foundation is not Bill Gates. It's some other Gates family. And they somehow show up first, not sure why. There is the Bill and Melinda Gates Trust and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. 2 separate piles of money. Very large piles. Currently, they have 68 billion. Yep, 68 billion. The gross receipts of 7 billion last year. Very large. And you can go into, just like with the Red Cross, you can go in here, you can see who's the CEO, how long they've been around, and you can look at their 990s as well. A funder's 990 will probably list, and hopefully I don't end up with egg on my face here. Yes. So these are all of the grants that the Gates Foundation made in 2022. They're all here. And it's a lot of them. It'll take you a while to look at all this. I mean, it's just scrolling and scrolling.
Sorry to interrupt. I'm going to make one clarification because I'm receiving tons of questions privately. So for everybody, we are going to send a list of all of these websites and funder lists and everything after the session, together with the recording of the session in different languages.
So thank you for that clarification, Clara. I'm just gonna, I would recommend, if you think Gates is a potential fit for you, you should look at the 990 for the Gates Foundation. It's going to give you a lot of information they probably wouldn't want to give you. So for instance, you can see here, they did some grants to this thing called the Nigeria Governors Forum, which was focused on global health and polio. And so if I was working on global health in Nigeria, I would want to look up they got a lot of funding from the Gates Foundation. I would want to learn more about that particular grantee, right? You can move along here. Here's something I funded at the University of Ghana, right? If I was working, if I knew people there, maybe I want to look into that. Right? This particular foundation funds this all over the world, so and you can probably find everything on here. So that's GuideStar. Like I mentioned, Candid is the result of a merger of two organizations. GuideStar allows you to look up 990s. Foundation Directory, or Foundation Center, I think is what it used to be called. And amazing, they want me to log in again. So this is specifically for foundations. Apparently my account is no longer active. I'm not gonna, this is the platinum version of Foundation Directory Online is paid, and I previously did pay for it, so I think that's why it's saying this. But basically they just take the same publicly available information and they just present it in a different way. With like more arguably easier to access than an IRS form. So right now I'm not upgraded, so I can't click on recipient profiles and these things. This is the stuff that you would have to pay for to be able to access. So for free, you can look at individual IRS forms. If you pay a little bit for a subscription to Foundation Directory or Instrumental or Grant Station or Grant Space or there's probably 100 different paid services that do essentially the same thing. Take the publicly available information and make it a little bit easier for you to look up. In addition to, the other one that a lot of folks use is Instrumental. This is, so Candid is a nonprofit. They raise money from foundations and from donors, and they have the same status as other nonprofits and CSOs that are raising money from foundations. And so for that reason, I tend to like the stuff that they put out a little bit more because they are in the same shoes as the fundraisers that they are servicing. Instrumental is a newer organization that has a lot of very cool features. It is somewhat expensive. I was just looking at the pricing yesterday, and in fact, it's gone up. What was it again? Yeah, so their pro version is $500 a month, and that's only if you sign up for the annual rate. And even their intro for orgs just getting started is $180 a month, and that's, again, you have to sign up annually. So this is quite a bit of money for folks starting up. However, they do have, this is something I tell people to do all the time. I think they're pretty happy with it. You can do a 14-day free trial with them for nothing. You don't have to give a credit card and cancel out the 14 days or anything. You can just use their suite right away. And they have all kinds of cool stuff in here. Trying to think if I can actually do a search without having an account. I guess I can't. But you can see here they list a lot of grants, and you can see that they're doing by focus area, by location. That's where and what, right? So you can scroll down and be like, oh, I'm in the District of Columbia, right? Here's all the grants. Here's all the grants for Africa. This is probably going to be a lot of grants, I imagine. International grants. Northern Mariana Islands, right? And then you can also look here if you are, right, different kind of stuff that you might be working on. I will say, like, a lot of this stuff is US centered because the data comes from US based tax forms. However, right, if you're applying to a funder in the US or trying to look up research and stuff, the fact that all that information is public can be it's available to the public, to the global public. You can all look up our 990s. You can look up Unfunded lists tax return if you want, and you can learn how much I get paid if that's something that's very that's very interesting to you. It's not very much. Right? So if you do have a very large budget, you might want to pay for the Instrumental service. It seems expensive to me, but in my experience, groups that are winning a lot of grants are putting some money into the research, right? You got to spend money to make money, I guess. There is another organization that is even newer than Instrumental, that I like, called Impala. And that their website is impala.digital. And they have they have some paid services, but their free version is very robust. I use their free version to do research, and they provide just a lot of very interesting stuff that the other groups do not. Unfunded List had one of their trainers come and give us a training, and we recorded that. So we have an hour-long recording of their director of partnerships explaining how it works, which Clara can share that. Unfortunately, that's in English, but we can share that afterwards, so you can get a real deep dive into how to use the free version of Impala here. And again, right, these are profiles of every nonprofit and foundation across the United States. This is all of the nonprofits and foundations that even file in the United States. So that does include some organizations that might be headquartered, like some foundations in Europe. Their money might be in the US and they might be looking to file, they might be filing in the US. So, and I've also talked to the people at the staff here, and they are looking for ways to include more global information. This is actually not an American company. They're based in the Middle East, and they're just trying to help people access the data. I think, how do you do? Oh, I gotta log in. So to show you some of the stuff that they show in here with the free version. First of all, this is, so right away when I log in, it shows me the Unfunded List profile. See the money we raised each year, right? Funder changes, revenues versus, like they have a very very cool dashboard. Makes it very easy to look through. Right here, it lists some of the funders that Unfunded List has had over the last few years. You could then click on the funder here and then see why and everything. And I think you can then view the profile of this funder, right? And you'll look at the grants that they're giving, right? And that sort of thing. And then I think down here you can list. Oh. Let's see where their grantees. It's been a little while since I used Impala, and they've changed a little bit. You can show their average grant sizes and everything, and you can see, like a lot of foundations during the pandemic, they gave away a lot more money, and they went back to normal afterwards. Here's a list of their grantees. You can see this is the same information that you get from the other sites, but just in a different formation. They fund mostly stuff in Ohio. These are various nonprofits in the state of Ohio. You can also search. So again, Gates will be in here. So graph that you can see right here is different information. They have 3,852 grantees. See where they're based. One of the things that's neat here is I think they do a hang in there. That's what it is. There's a lot of information here in Impala that is not in the other sources. And again, they have a very robust free version. I highly recommend this. I should mention, like, I don't work for any of these companies. They're all pretty much doing the same thing. They're, accessing public information and showing it to you. Instrumental has a feature that allows you to go in and like do up a profile for your organization, and then they send you a report every week. It's like, you're eligible for all of these. You could apply for all of these things. And that's a lot of folks. That's exactly what they're looking for. I will say that this is all automated. Just because you're a fit on paper, that doesn't necessarily mean that you actually can apply to all those things. So I think if you're like any software tool, if you're going to use an instrumental report, or if you're going to use any of these other things, you want to, make sure you're doing running it through the human filter as well, right? Make sure it matches your where and what. Make sure that the capacity and the interest, right, and the accessibility is there. I'm going to talk about one last service. This is one that I use a lot. ProPublica is a nonprofit journalism organization, one of my favorite sources of news. I think journalists that are researching nonprofits This is probably the main thing that they use. One of the things I like about it is that they have, most of the other ones limit, they only have, they only show you tax returns for like the last 5 years or something. ProPublica has them going back all the way back. You can look up tax returns from the 50s for the Red Cross here, and lots of other stuff. You can look up specific, right? You can even look at, I've never actually done that. So you could search ProPublica on the ProPublica Nonprofit Explorer, right? And here they are. And then here are their various other entities and other stuff. If you are in a position where you can't spend anything on research, I think you'll still be able to do research. You've got Google, you could use the free version of Impala, you can use ProPublica's Nonprofit Explorer, you could go to the IRS website, you go to the individual websites of these funders and foundations and other things. And there's lots of ways these days, assuming you've got internet connection, to be able to do research on funders. Let's see, is that all of the things? Yes, so once you've like started doing your research, right, and you've identified organizations, right, there's a couple different tricks that you can go into in terms of addressing those 3 things that we were looking for: capacity, interest, and accessibility. And so I'm going to pick on a friend of mine. So this is the website for Spark Microgrants. The founder is a friend of mine named Sasha Fisher. This is an organization that does storytelling training for women in Rwanda. So that would be the answers to their 2 questions. No, I'm sorry. I confused it with another organization. They are in Rwanda. They do microgrants. These are microgrants. They give $10,000 grants to CSOs in Rwanda, which is a very apropos thing for them to be doing. So let's say you are interested in empowering folks in Rwanda, or your organization is in Rwanda. That may be some of you on the call right now might be based in Rwanda. You should definitely go to the Spark Microgrants website. They list all of their funding partners very conveniently for you. These are their previous funding partners. A lot of these are some pretty well-known funders that I know that I've been able to meet. You can also see that she's got funding from some companies as well. Some coffee-related funding, Paul Newman's foundation. But these are their past funders. In their current funders, they've made it pretty easy for you. You can actually just click on the name of the funder. And here we are at a funder's website. And actually, when I was looking at the Spark website, I thought this is a new funder I've never heard of, CRI Foundation, before yesterday when I was walking through this. You can see right away, they like pictures. They like to have pictures. And actually very interesting, you can see this picture right here comes from Spark Microgrants, one of their grantees. And so they got funding from the program that's called CRI-DIV, which right off the top of my head, I don't really know. You might want to look into like what that means, who we are, right? I just sort of, if I was running a Rwandan organization and trying to assess this funder, right? This is sort of what I would do. Go to the Who We Are page and see, all right, so they are based in Boston, Massachusetts. Useful information. Maybe I have a board member in Boston, and I'm going to want to ask them if they know anything about this organization. And then I see they've got they're pretty specific in their what? They've got 3 different categories of funding. So their primary grant-making program, and which I take to mean the program that receives the most money, CRI Health, provides grants to organizations and entities dedicated to improving health outcomes in Africa. I know some of you in the call are dedicated to improving health outcomes in Africa, so that's probably worth looking into. There's also, looks like they have a partnership with Development Innovation Ventures, which is some of you may know, this is a rolling innovation funding program at the USAID. And I think probably a lot of you on the call are a fit for the Development Innovation Ventures funding. there. That's a very broad program, basically just for any kind of innovation in the developing world, the global south, or the list of countries receiving humanitarian assistance, right? And then they also fund research, academic research funded through the Weiss Fund, as well as investments in Africa. So what I see about the research thing is that probably the Weiss, if I were a researcher and I thought that I was interested in that program, my next step would be the Weiss Fund. I need to learn more about that. If I think that the Development Innovation Funding Program is a good one for me, I'm going to want to make sure I know about USAID's DIV funding, right? There's also help. This funder has sections for each one, so you can go here, and you can read, right, about what they're doing. Something that is sort of jumping out to me here, this funder very clearly likes to have high quality art. Like they want to have high quality photos of the work that their grantees are doing. That's just something that seems pretty clear to me. From looking here, I also know they credit these photos. All these photos are credited to folks that are in their grantee pool. So if I know that my organization has beautiful pictures of beautiful work going on, that might make me think that, right, they might be more interested in what I'm doing. If I know that my organization unfortunately can't produce this kind of great art, then I might score them a little bit lower in the interest category, right? The last one that we're trying to figure out is how accessible they are is often the hardest part of this. Some foundations they don't want you to contact them, and so they make it very difficult. It's not clear to me how to move forward with this particular foundation if you think you're a fit. And that may be disappointing. I wish I could, but that's the part where I said there's not necessarily any shortcuts. So even once you've identified this funder and you think maybe it's a good fit, right? And you've read over everything. I'm gonna look here at their method, see if there's more. I'm having an internet problem. Anyway, I don't want to dive. Yeah, because I guess we won't do that today. So anyway, if you think CRI Foundation is a fit for you, feel free to go into that website, do some additional looking, right? I'll just look real quickly here at Spark's second foundation. So a donor list like this, like the one that Spark provides on their website, is just a really, especially if you think Spark is a similar organization to you, or maybe you already have a partnership with Spark Microgrants or something like that. This is just going to be a really good resource. I will say you probably shouldn't just reach out to those funders and say, hey, I see you're funding Spark, therefore you should fund me now. That probably won't work, but this is a good sign. Maybe you have a relationship with Spark, maybe there's an event that's being funded, or that both the partners will be there, right? You'll need, that's sort of the art of fundraising. That's where you'll need to come up with something specific. Instrumental might just tell you, oh, yes, you're a fit, right? And that's where they will end. You, as a human, need to figure out, can I realistically get in front of this group and fund? And so this is a completely different funder of Spark. This is the Woodcock Foundation. There's a little picture. The woodcock is a bird, by the way. There's a picture of the bird right there. They list on their website, they list their grantees, which is very helpful. So I can see all of the grantees, right? And maybe I'm looking at this foundation and I'm like, oh my God, I partner with all of these groups. I know all of these people. We have partnerships with every single one of these grants, and I've never, right? Then you might want to start asking around, see if maybe you can't get introduced to somebody at the funder. Let's see if they actually, so they list their board members, stuff like that. And I will say, you shouldn't, just because they've done this doesn't necessarily mean you should go stalk their LinkedIn or try to bother them or anything, or you want to show as much tact as possible. Pretty much everybody who's giving out grants is getting approached a lot, and it can be frustrating. And that's why they usually set up specific processes that they will want you to follow. And here they've got grant making policy, right? If you think Woodcock is a good fit for you, you absolutely have to read this. This is their grant making policy. You shouldn't assume that you can apply to this foundation without reading their grant making policy. Unfortunately, when you read this, it's going to be very disappointing for you, which they admit. So if you get down to the bottom here, you'll see this section, and they put this part in bold. Now, they didn't put it in bold because by accident or anything like that. They want you to read and understand this. For this reason, and because our resources are limited, we have instituted a policy that unsolicited proposals and letters of inquiry will not be reviewed. And just to be, this is their attempt to be crystal clear. And I'll try to be even more crystal clear. So what they mean by unsolicited is that the only proposals they want to read are proposals that they ask for. So if they want to consider an organization for funding, they contact you and tell you how to do that. And until that happens, you will not be able to submit a proposal. If you could find an email address and email your proposal as an attachment to them, that will be an unsolicited proposal, and it will not be reviewed. They're saying that, like, not only is that not the way to do it, but that they won't respond to you, they won't read it. It will get ignored if you don't follow their process. And that's very frustrating to hear, because there is no open you can't apply to this foundation. This is frustrating. And they acknowledge that. We regret the disappointment that this may cause the many worthy grant seekers who hear or read about the foundation. But we have found that this policy works best for us. This policy spares applicants the frustrating experience of waiting and then being told there is not sufficient alignment or capacity for funding. They don't want you to waste your time writing a proposal to them until they are pretty sure they're going to fund you, right? So they are, and you can tell by their list of grantees that they're working on specific issues in specific areas. They're probably relying on their grantees and other folks in their personal network on how, like, we don't really know how they find new grantees. They've been very clear to not apply to them. So once you have identified them as someone with capacity, right, and possibly interest in what you're doing, you sort of have to admit at this point that the accessibility score is going to be pretty low. If you were to find an identical foundation that accepts proposals, you would want to score that one a little bit higher, probably apply to that one first. And the reason they do it this way, they don't want you to waste their time. I read a lot of how to apply pages, and we don't want you to waste your time is a very common refrain. Organizations that receive a lot of proposals, so like the Ford Foundation, for instance, I think they might receive the most of any private foundation. And we're talking like they'll get 50 to 60,000 proposals, and then they'll fund 4,000 programs, which means that they're rejecting 55,000 nonprofits. If I had to say no to 55,000 like local nonprofits doing good work, right, that would concern me. I'd want to make sure that they were, that they knew they were a good fit, right, before they applied. Let's check back in on my. Yeah, so donor lists and grantee lists are great places to look for things. Lots of foundations will list their grantees, not just on their 90, but on their websites as well. This is the MacArthur Foundation's grant search page. Some of you may be familiar with the MacArthur Foundation. They do you may have heard of the Genius Grants. And they also run a program called Lever for Change, which gives $100 million grants. And in fact, I was looking up Harvard last night. They have funded Harvard. And they funded Unfunded list. They don't anymore. They stopped during the pandemic, and my program officer transferred or whatever, but you can go there and you can read, right? I got a grant in 2017 from them for $25,000, which they invited me to submit. I met one of their program officers at an event. I knew he was going to be there, and I did my best to impress him, and I did. And he invited me to apply for this. When we got the $25,000 grant, I did my best to impress everybody at MacArthur with what we were able to do with that. And they liked it, and so they gave me, then they followed up with a 2-year grant of $100,000. And hopefully I'll be able to get back on their radar sometime. But here they are. And very interestingly, just use the word unfunded. So this is every grantee they've ever had that uses the word unfunded. And it's sort of interesting. They're talking about unfunded mandates. But like I said, if you look at So Harvard is the big school here in the US, you may have heard of. They raise a lot of money for their various centers and things. So you can see that in its history, MacArthur has given 286 different grants to Harvard for all kinds of very specific work. You can go in, right? You can see here that in 1994, the University of Sussex's Science Policy Research Unit received this grant. And you can look at it and then look at the follow-on grants and the earlier grants that they've gotten. MacArthur has a big staff and also is in the news a lot as possibly one of the best known foundations. And they are also have I know from my previous conversations with them, a lot of commitment to transparency. So they've got a lot of information on here. Other funders, they might not want you to know this information. There are foundations that don't have websites at all. And so that 990 might be your absolute only source for information. So let's say we've done our research, we've identified some funders. We want to go in. We're going to look at some actual funders, how to apply pages, right, and sort of try to assess some accessibility. I've chosen 3 examples for today. These are 3 examples that in our last round of proposal review, some of the proposals we reviewed were all of these funders received proposals. So I've read submissions to these funders. So I'm going to talk about Global Innovation Fund, the Zayed Sustainability Prize, and Global Fund for Children. These are all very big funders that fund globally. I think probably everybody on the call is probably a fit for one or more of these funders. I think it's very unlikely that anybody would be a fit for all 3. And even if you are a fit for all 3, you probably wouldn't be able to submit the same proposal to all 3. I'll try to get into some of the specifics here. So here's Global Innovation Fund. Let's see, they also seem to like pictures. These gentlemen are flying a model airplane, I guess. So this is the apply for funding page. Like most funders, they don't want to receive an enormous number of applications that they just have to reject. They don't want to waste your time. They would love it if everybody who applied was a great fit, right? And so they have done their best to try to give you a lot of guidance. And I can tell by reading between the lines in some of this guidance that there are some specific things they really don't want you to do, right? And so looking at this, right, we accept applications on a rolling basis. What that means is that you can apply at any time. They don't have a deadline. That's great. This is great. I love funders that fund on a rolling basis. You don't have to rush. You can get the proposal in when you want to. Our window is always open with no deadlines for rounds of funding, right? And then right away they say, please review the guidance. They desperately want you to review the guidance. I'm sure a lot of people apply without reviewing the guidance, but they don't want you to do that. So they want everybody to review the guidance. They probably want you to take a look at what we fund, the type of funding. You should reread all of this stuff again and again and again before you put the proposal together to increase your chances. Again, this is a big funder that receives a lot of applications, and they've done many rounds of funding. And so they have written this stuff to try to help you determine if you're a fit. And ultimately, right, it's not just that they want to help you determine if you're a fit. They want you to determine if you're not a fit. So then you can go, like I said, don't fall in love with any funder, right? You want to be able to say, this is not a fit. We can save ourselves a couple of hours of time and not apply to them, right? And they're giving you all the information that they possibly can to help you make that decision. In particular, anytime an organization has a what we don't fund section, that's one of the first things I want to look at. They didn't make a whole what we don't fund page because they're soft on this. They won't fund these things. So if you're doing one of these 6 things, that's great. In fact, great work is being done in all these areas, right? You might be doing but once you see this in the what we don't fund page, then you can know, right, move on, right? Maybe you're not doing all of those things. You're like, all right, I don't do any of those things. That's good. That's good. So then you can go on, right? You want to look at what we do fund, right? And right, just in general, from what I know from Global Innovation Fund. Yeah, they're doing a really good job of making it of making this clear, right? And you want to look at the bolded sections. Right, so they have, right, so you need to be focused. Is that how you spell focused? What's wrong? Right, this is bolded. Your innovations, right? So you need to be, as long as you need to be focusing on folks who are living on less than $5 a day, which is a lot of, right? The other thing, this funder has the word innovation in their title, and they have a very specific definition of what an innovation is and what it is not. And you need to make sure that you're lining up with that. You might consider yourself innovative, but you're not innovative in the way that they're looking for. Or maybe your program isn't innovative. Not everything needs to be innovative. That's fine, right? You're going to want to move on to another fund. But if you end up looking through all of this stuff, paying particular section to the bold sections, right? And also clicking on any links that they provide, right? And again, they're giving 12 very clear things, and you want to make sure that you knock all 12 out of the park. You really want to make sure you're being critical here, right? Don't like try to stretch the truth, like try to look for reasons that you're not a fit. Don't look for reasons that you are a fit. And again, they're being, this is of the funders that you might apply to, this one's doing a really good job of giving you the information. And so once you've figured out, I think I am a good fit here, you're going to want to look at the application process, understanding the criteria, right? There is an initial application, then there will be a follow-on call, and then they ask for a full application, they do some due diligence, and then the decision panel comes in, and then there is a funding agreements, right? And so I would probably want to take some more time, read all that stuff, and you go to begin and apply for funding, where they actually send me back to the very beginning, click on this link, and eventually, and only now have I gotten to the actual submission form. Just to be clear, this is something I've seen. You can't email your proposal as an attachment to someone who works at Global Innovation Fund. You must get to this page and actually work on this. I went through and looked through all these questions. In our next session, led by Abby, that's about actual grant writing, we're going to talk about how to answer some of the questions on this particular form. So if you thought if Global Innovation Fund is an interesting funder to you, we will be discussing specifically how to answer questions on their proposal in the next session. For now, we're going to go look at a different funder that is in many ways very similar to Global Innovation Fund. This is Global Fund for Children. And similar to Global Innovation Fund, many of their proposals, some of the proposals we reviewed in the fall, people had applied to Global Fund for Children. So I was looking over this website the other day, preparing for this session, and it was a challenge for me, actually. I found this one is not as transparent about how to apply as Global Innovation Fund. Global Innovation Fund literally has a section called How to Apply, and you can find it very quickly. I was looking at Global Fund for Children's website for several minutes yesterday, and I almost gave up because I couldn't figure it out. The thing they do that is confusing to me is they don't use the word grant maker. You can look all over this website. They don't seem to use the word grants. They don't call themselves a grant maker. They don't talk about how to apply for grants. They don't call the people that they fund grantees. Right. So usually those are the words I'm looking for. And so what and I was staying away from the partner section, because usually partner means right, two equal organizations will partner with each other to do some work, and they're both right funding themselves, or maybe they go after funding together. Kujalink and Unfunded List has a partnership, so I wouldn't say I'm a grantee of Kujalink. We're a partner. Global Fund for Children calls their grantees partners, which is not standard, but every funder gets to decide the words that they use, right? So if you want to become a partner of Global Fund for Children, what they mean is, right, you actually want to receive funding from them? And one thing that's neat about them, they have information in Spanish and French. And I think they even accept proposals in Spanish and French, although you'll have to double check me on it. But at the very least, they are providing this information in both languages, and they are, like the other ones, being clear right? Who they're looking for, what their mission, what they look for, right? And then if they list, right, these things, what they're not able to support. And here we get to, this sounds just like my organization. How can I introduce my organization to Global Fund for Children? Right? You might, if you're out there and you're lifting children out of poverty somewhere in the world, you might be a fit for Global Fund for Children, and you may want to contact them. So, and again, that's not, you can't just get an email address of someone at Global Fund for Children and send your proposal as an attachment. You have to do their very specific thing. They want you to submit a brief organizational profile, right? You go here, and they ask these brief questions. What are your funding sources? These sorts of things. This question right here, what are your top 5 funding sources? Right away to me, if I work somewhere and we don't have top 5 funding sources, it's going to make me think that I'm probably not a fit for Global Fund for Children. This is a big funder. They probably want to make sure that you already have some funding and sustainability. So that question jumps right out to me as I look at this here. Right? How are you referred? Like, did somebody refer you to this? If you have, this is something where you'll want to think, like, you shouldn't just be like, oh, Dave Moss told me about it in a webinar. That doesn't have the weight that I would like for it to have. If you know a board member at Global Fund for Children, or someone with like some gravitas, right, that would be a good answer here. Also, they're asking for their email address of the person, so you should expect them to contact, right? These questions are not really about your program, right? This is what I call shortlisting. This is for them to figure out if you're a fit. So you want to be super honest and candid and clear and try to be as impressive as possible when you fill this out, send it off, and hopefully they will follow up with you, and then you'll hopefully be invited to submit a real proposal. And so those are two. So Global Innovation Fund and Global Fund for Children, very similar funders. They start off with the word global, right? And in fact, you might be lifting children out of poverty who are living under $5 a day. You might very well be a fit for both of these organizations. They are different organizations, though. They have different approaches. You're going to want to make sure you do your research beforehand, right, and get the best possible applications into each. Then this is a group that over the years I've reviewed quite a few submissions to this prize. So this is Zayed Sustainability Prize. It's a different type of funder. This is more like a competition grant. It's quite popular these days. I had a partnership with the Solve Challenge at MIT, which is somewhat similar to this, and a lot of the folks there were also applying to Zayed back then. Applying to a competition is a little bit different than applying to a grant maker. Usually, their competitions are a little bit harder to research, and they're actually usually a lot more competitive, as the name suggests, right? However, they're usually entirely open, right? Competitions want to get a bunch of applications, right? And they want to find a small number of great fits, right? And so you take a slightly different approach when looking at a competition. Is this something I'm going to be able to win, right? And as opposed to, is this something that I'm going to be able to convince the board members of this foundation to fund, right? So this one gives you, right, in order to apply for the Zayed Sustainability Prize, which it looks like their application is open. You can apply between now and June 23rd, 2024. They have a video tutorial they want you to watch. They're going to want you to look at they have different categories: health, food, energy, water, climate action, global high schools. Figure out which category you're in. Maybe you're not sure. Maybe you're in both water and climate action. Read both sections, figure out which one's the best fit, right? And then your first step, register, make the prize, all of that. Do they list previous winners? It's something with any prize, is you're definitely going to want to look at who's the one in the past. Yeah, I'm not sure. They don't seem to list it here. It's going to be something that you might want to need to Google and find the press release or something like that. All right. I am near the end of my outline. I hope that This has all been useful for everybody. Let's see. Yeah. So I was going to try to do a workshop hypothetical example, but I think we've worked through enough examples. So I think we can, and I just want to be mindful of time for everybody. If there are any questions.
Thank you so much, Dave. This has been really helpful. We are going to open the floor for anyone that has questions. I have a couple written down in the chat. But before, if anyone wants to raise their hands or just write down the questions on the chat, that's also a possibility.
We can start with the
I think
chat.
this has been really useful, and just to clarify again to everybody, we are going to send the recording for the meeting because a lot of this information is probably new for a lot of people, and also there were tons of websites and just a lot of information to absorb in just an hour and 20 minutes. So you will be able to watch the whole session again, and we will also send you a document with some tips, websites, etc. So the first question was the one by Stina that you already read out loud. Do you want to say anything else about that? She was asking, what were the three categories you scored funders on? Capacity, amount of money, interest. Do they care about the change we make, and accessibility, application process, and connections? And then,
yeah, I mean, those are the three things. And you'll want to, again, these are something that you'll want to think about what it means for your organization, right? Maybe if your budget is small, capacity isn't as important of a category, right? Like so here, for instance, here at Unfunded List, I don't need millions of dollars to run this program. So I don't need to go after super rich folks, right? The average American can make a substantial donation to my organization. So I don't spend a whole lot of time with what they call a high net worth individual strategy. I'm not really trying to go after the super wealthy or very large foundations all the time because I don't have a very large budget. If you are trying to build a hospital or do something very expensive, then capacity is going to be very important for you if you're doing a capital campaign or something like that. If you are extremely well networked individual, like let's say you used to work at the UN or you're one of your board members is a former ambassador or something, then you may want to make that your primary category, right? You may want to even start there by going to your most well-connected board members and seeing who they are connected to. One thing that I didn't do today with several of the search things, so like for instance, in ProPublica, you could go in and you can select people and you search for Donald Trump, and it will show you every single time Donald Trump's name has showed up on a 990. So it'll show you every single tax return for the Donald Trump Foundation, which is a not a great foundation. They lost their status, but you can look at the stuff that he was doing, and you can also see he was on the board of the Police Athletic League for a while, and he's been on the board of some other nonprofits. He's no longer legally allowed to be on any boards, but that's neither here nor there. You could also Google. You could also do the people search for let's say you have a retired ambassador on your board. You could do a people search for him, right, and find all the nonprofits that he's been affiliated with, right? So for some folks, some organizations that need to raise a ton of money, they may want to focus on finding organizations with a lot of capacity. Other organizations might want to focus on the accessibility piece, make sure that this is something that they're able to apply to, that they have the network for. If your interest is very niche, like Unfunded List is, that's our main thing. I happen to be fairly well networked, right? But a lot of the people I know, they're interested in funding climate change or health or refugee work or something like that, and less interested in philanthropy support. So for me, determining funder fit is all about that interest one. But this could be very different for different organizations, and you might decide to include a fourth category. I don't want to imply to anyone that there's like only one way to score and research prospects, because every funder is different and every nonprofit's different. So to some extent, we need to massage a little bit. So were there other questions from the chat?
Yes, very quick ones. So Mariana Linares asked, she doesn't have a clear picture on if Red Cross info gave me as a hunter for funders. I don't understand that question exactly. Wait, Mariana, if you're there, I know you're there because I can see you on the list. Can you ask that in Spanish, please, if you don't mind?
Yes.
Mariana, ¿podrías preguntar eso en español si podés? Es que la primera no la terminé de entender.
Ajá, en español sería la búsqueda de la Red Cross. ¿Cómo me sirve a mí? O sea, no entendí la cualidad de ese ejemplo. O sea, si ahí él estaba poniendo como ejemplo en Candid, creo, y buscó Red Cross, entonces, pues yo puedo ver los impuestos de esa organización, pero eso en qué me ayuda como investigadora de fondos.
I see her question in English, and I think I know what she's asking.
Okay.
So one, I was using the Red Cross as an example. The question is, do not have a clear understanding of what does the Red Cross info give me as a hunter for fund? Like, how does that help you look for funding?
Yes.
The Red Cross is one of the world's largest nonprofits, and I was trying to show you what a nonprofit's tax return looks like. And because they're the biggest and have the most money, it has the most information in it. So that, and also most people have heard of the Red Cross. That's why I chose them, just to show you what the 990 form looks like. That's why I chose that example.
Thank you.
And you say, if you're not from the USA, can you still create a candid profile? Yes. You can create a free account with Candid, and it'll let you use their various free services, which are, and again, Canada's very big. They have a lot of different services, and they're coming up with like new services all the time. I don't work there, and it's been a little while since I spoke to them, so I'm not like 100% up to date on what they do. They are the biggest and the best when it comes to nonprofit data and information, and I would highly recommend anyone doing prospect research should be on Candid's website on a regular basis. For instance, one of the things, I know we have some folks from Ukraine on the call. And I remember we had someone from Ukraine in the last round that I spoke to. And I know that Candid has this report. Yeah. Those council on foundations. So here this is Candid working as like a journalist, trying to show like as much information about the philanthropic response to the war in Ukraine. So these are news articles that they've written about it. Here are reports about the funding. Tons of resources in here. In particular, they have a like, yeah. So they're keeping track of 3,116 grants worth that much money, and you can download it as a CSV, the list of everything. So if you are fundraising in Ukraine, you absolutely need to look at this information. This information doesn't exist anywhere else, and so all the data does come from the U.S.'s Internal Revenue Service, but this report would only be useful for fundraisers in Ukraine. So, Mariana, does that I believe I've answered your question? Are there any more from the chats?
Yes, we do have some questions for the chat. Unfortunately, the interpreters will have to go very soon, but let's try to do one more at least. And to everybody, if we don't get to respond to all the questions, we are going to send you those responses by email.
And
we can commit to that.
And if you submit a proposal to Unfunded List through the CrucialLink partnership, we will review your proposal and I'll talk to you one-on-one afterwards. That won't happen until June or July, but at that point, I'm happy. We can talk. As you can tell, hopefully from today, I'm happy to talk about this kind of stuff, and I would really love to be able to go like deep dive one-on-one with each of you. I see some questions here written in English that I think I can answer. Is it easier for these various foundations to fund an organization whose leader lives abroad and works with staff members on the ground? One of the things I have noticed is that if you want funding from America, from American foundations, the United States of America, it's going to be helpful if somebody who's particularly if your fundraiser is based in the US, not just in the US, like New York City. The vast majority of the money in the world is in New York City, and most of your very large organizations that fundraise will have a major gifts officer located in New York. I'm based in the US, but I'm 7 hours away from New York. It's inconvenient for me to get to. But nonetheless, I am registered officially in New York because that's where like most of the funders and funding comes from. And it would be difficult for me to get funding from a funder there. It would be slightly more difficult for me than it would for someone who's actually in New York, because that person can meet. It's just easier for them to do the accessibility piece. So at the same time, though, there are funders who are saying out loud, we want to be funding locally. We want our funding to go to organizations on the ground. Right? If you're in Tanzania or Gambia or Venezuela and you're in a rural area of those countries and everyone from your organization is from the area and has never left, it's going to be pretty hard for you to access organizations that are based in the US. Over time, one of the things I've noticed, and I don't think this is fair, but organizations in Africa that raise a lot of money almost always have a founder who went to college in the US or has some sort of connection to the US. For instance, Adeso, the founder is from Africa, but she did go to school in the US, and I'm sure that's helpful for networking stuff. Spark Microgrants, the example I used earlier, their founder is from the US, and then the entire staff is from Rwanda. This is something that you're going to want to be thinking about specifically for your organization as you assess accessibility with the organization. Does this funder have a stated interest in funding local leaders, right? So there's some, like, for instance, President Obama had the Young African Leaders Program. You needed to be my friend Sasha would not have been able to win that because she's not from Africa, right? Some of these funders very clearly want you to be actually from the community. And that's a very exciting part of philanthropy for me now. But obviously, if you know somebody, if you went to college with them, if they're a personal connection to you, if you have some cultural similarities, then that accessibility piece is just going to be a little bit easier. And so, that part can be a challenge. But like there are many examples of organizations abroad where folks are doing the work on the ground, and then there's 1 or 2 staff members based in the US who are focused on fundraising. Or you have a completely separate organization called like Friends of my organization that's based in the US that's entirely dedicated to fundraising. If we are asked for a proposal
sorry to interrupt. We can continue responding questions. It's just that the interpreters will leave.
No more
so
translation.
Anyone that wants to stay, we can stay for 10 more minutes. I have no problem if you don't have any trouble with that, Dave. Because I think most of our audience understands English anyway. So we can stay for 10 more minutes, and for the rest of you that don't speak English, just send me an email. I'm going to write down my email address on the chat now, and let me know so I can send you the responses to the questions, okay?
Yep. So there's this one question from Victor Guerrero.
Thank you for all the, thank you for all the interpreters.
Yes, thank you, interpreters.
You did a great job. Thank you so much.
I assume you did a great job. I didn't.
I can sense it.
I have a sense
Yeah.
that. So if we're asked for a proposal for a period no longer than 12 months, for instance, what would you advise about the proper time for the proposal? Is it a key issue? So yeah, I don't have all the details here, but if the funder, you have to do what the funder's saying. If they're saying this is funding for 12 months, then you need then yes, it is a key issue. Your proposal needs to cover 12 months and not anymore. I mean, maybe there could be a slight, like, slightly off there, but I'll explain some of the reasons why there. So a lot of funders they are on a fiscal year budget. So a foundation that's registered as a foundation in the U.S., they don't have to pay taxes. We have a special law here that was founded a very long time ago, and you can set up a foundation, and you don't have to pay taxes on the money that's inside the foundation. But you have to. But every single year, every 12 months, you have to give away 5% of all of your money. And that's how foundations work in the U.S. And that's why so many of them are on a yearly cycle, because every year it's a legal requirement. If they don't give that money away, they will lose their status and they'll have to pay taxes and back taxes, and nothing rich people want to avoid more than that. So yeah, if the 12 months thing is definitely very real. And without knowing more about the specific funder, my guess is that's probably like their budget and timeline and everything very, very, very rigid. They won't be able to bend on that stuff.
What was the last one that you responded?
I just had a 12 months question. There's a question: donors that are interested in funding activities in Palestine.
Yes.
That's similar to the what and where. Search for. There's probably a candid report for it. Let's check really quick. That's something where you are going to want to make sure to do your research. Obviously, that is somewhat political and there's different opinions there. You're going to want to make sure that the work you're doing is in line with what the person is trying to fund. No, that's not going to be enough. Yep. Oh, that's coronavirus. Interesting. So this one showed up. This is actually, this is the Center for Disaster Philanthropy. This organization, when they were brand new, sent a proposal to Unfunded list, and we reviewed it. And they've actually been extremely successful since, and they're very good at helping philanthropy respond in very quickly when it's a disaster, when it's imminent funding. Generally, philanthropy is good at deliberative, slow, long-term action. And when they have to move quickly, they're not very good at it. But obviously, sometimes there's a huge disaster. It could be an earthquake or something like that. And then philanthropy has to move quicker. And this is a resource for those folks. And it looks like they've created a fund, a relief and recovery fund. There's probably lots of others. That's something that's going to be a difficult topic to research for several reasons. One, the urgent nature of it, and the fact that it's somewhat political in nature. Any comments on the funds for NGO platform? So I don't know that much about it. I've heard of it, and my understanding is that they share opportunities to apply to. Right? Is that generally they have a newsletter and they share funding opportunities?
Yes. Actually, it's basically compared to what you've presented. But I would like to know if you had explored it and
sorry, I can't.
Sorry,
I can tell you're talking. I can't make it out though.
It's cutting a little or a lot.
I don't know that much about it. Like I was saying earlier, though, I've been researching funders for a long time. And I remember when my very first job, when Conan showed me the different websites you could use, none of those websites exist anymore. They've all gone out of business or changed their name or something. And every year, new ones pop up. So again, there's always, and you should keep track of what comes and goes and all that. But because of that, I'm not intimately familiar with everything. And I also think you need, like, there just has to be some extra, like, human element. The one thing I have noticed is that a lot of the newer groups that do this kind of service, one, they are like for-profit companies that have like investment funding behind them, not philanthropy funding. So they're literally not even fundraising the same way you are. And yet they're giving you advice on how to fundraise that way, and they're also often saying that it's very, very easy. One of my big criticisms of Instrumental, again, they're the ones that had the video that said find funders in under 60 minutes, right? And they're always saying, they're writing blog posts all the time, like, we make fundraising easy for you. Like, I really will never tell anyone I can make fundraising easy. What I try to do is explain how hard it is, because it is very, very difficult. Yes, there is more philanthropic wealth being given away now than there ever has been, but there are also more people asking for it than there ever have been. And 99% of grant proposals that get written get rejected with no feedback. So that means most of the people sitting down to write proposals are just wasting their time. And this is time we can't afford to waste, because you all have very important work to do. So my goal is to make sure you're empowered in this way, right? To find funders that really are a good fit. So when you take the time to write a proposal, that you've got, a realistic shot of winning that. But yeah, again, so I don't know about funds for NGOs specifically. I will say that it seemed like last round that is how a lot of folks are using it. So by all means, I would definitely keep using it.
Did you read Victor Guerrero's question about the 12 month?
Yes.
Okay, and then let's see. Okay, Palestine, yes.
Review table.
NGOs. Okay, and then to Anne, yes, we can reach different members individually. Also, let's have a moment, although half of the participants have left. But just to close this, Dave will close this, but before closing this, I want to say that if you apply and submit a proposal for unfunded list, you will be assisted individually. So first, you're going to receive a lot of feedback for your proposal, and then you will also have the opportunity to have a personal meeting with Dave, where you can ask all the questions, and you will have a whole hour to have a conversation with him, and sometimes with me. But if you have an urgent question, you could just send it to us, no problem. I just wrote my email on the chat, so send the question there, and I can also share that with Dave. Yes. Also, in 2 weeks, we are going to have our next webinar that is going to focus in writing proposals. You can read about that on our website, kuchalink.org, and also you're going to receive emails with all the information about that webinar and instructions to register. So don't miss it, because it will also be amazing, and we'll have one facilitator and 4 speakers, and you will be able to ask all the questions you want as well. Dave, anything else?
It looks like there's a hand raised. I don't know if there's a question. Opio has his hand raised. I don't know if there's a question or
not. Let me see. Sorry, to Farah's question. Are you a Civicus member?
Oh.
Okay, so I would advise you to work with them, and they have a lot of more information about grassroots movements, platforms, and funding than Kuchalink, to be honest. Let's see the raised question. 1 second. Opio Johnson. Can you unmute yourself, Fabio?
Ask him to.
Yes, hello,
Yes.
good afternoon. Sorry, I'd stepped out a bit. So, my question was, like when you're getting a fund, what's the right approach? Is it just getting someone drafting my proposal, sending it to them, or I don't know, maybe I just needed some help in there, because we have our NGO which has been running for more than 4 years. However much we've been doing it as a community base, and it's not registered.